Sputnik 2, or Prosteyshiy Sputnik 2, was the second spacecraft launched into Earth orbit on 3 November 1957, and the first to carry a living animal, a dog named Laika. Launched by the U.S.S.R, Sputnik 2 was a 4-meter-high cone-shaped capsule with a base diameter of 2 meters that weighed around 500 kilograms, though it was not designed to separate from the rocket core that brought it to orbit, bringing the total mass in orbit to 7.79 tons. It contained several compartments for radio transmitters, a telemetry system, a programming unit, a regeneration and temperature control system for the cabin, and scientific instruments. A separate sealed cabin contained the dog Laika. Engineering and biological data were transmitted using the tons.It telemetry system, transmitting data to Earth for a 15-minute period during each orbit. 2 photometers were on board for measuring solar radiation and cosmic rays. Sputnik 2 did not contain a television camera. TV images of dogs on Korabl Sputnik 2 are commonly misidentified as Laika. Sputnik 2 was launched into space only 32 days after its predecessor Sputnik 1. Due to the huge success of Sputnik 1, Nikita Khrushchev had Sergei Korolev on orders and back to work creating a Sputnik 2 that needed to be ready for space for the 40th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. Many people believed that Khrushchev pushed Korolev into creating Sputnik 2 against his will and advised that it would end in failure. But actually Korolev was more than happy to comply, and he used the excitement from Sputnik 1 to help accelerate his own plans for exploring space, particularly putting man into orbit. Sputnik 2 was part of an idea that included Sputnik 1 that came from Korolev that was approved in January 1957. At the time, it was not clear that the Soviets' main satellite plan would be able to get to space because of the ongoing issues with the R-7 ICBM, which would be needed to launch a satellite of that size. Korolev proposed substituting 2 simple satellites for the IGY satellite. The choice to launch these 2 instead of waiting for the more advanced Sputnik 3 to be finished was largely motivated by the desire to launch a satellite to orbit before the U.S. mission profile. Sputnik 2, known to Korolev's design bureau as Prosteyshiy Sputnik 2, meaning Simple Satellite 2, was launched into a 212 times 1,660 kilometers orbit with a period of 103.7 minutes on a modified ICBM R-7, similar to the one used to launch Sputnik 1. The R-7 was also known by its GURVO designation 8K71, as well as the T-3, M104, and Type A. The R-7 modified for the PS2 satellite launch was designated 8K71PS. Unlike Sputnik 1, Sputnik 2 was not designed to detach from the R-7 sustainer core, since Sputnik 1's core stage had demonstrated an acceptable orbital lifespan. This allowed the core's tons.It telemetry system to be used to transmit data, but would lead to speculation that Sputnik 2 had failed to separate. After Sputnik 2 reached orbit, the interior temperature rapidly climbed to over 40 degrees Celsius, and Laika survived for only a few hours instead of the planned 10 days. Sputnik 2's orbit decayed, and it re-entered Earth's atmosphere on 14 April 1958, after 162 days in orbit. Passenger. The first living creature to enter orbit was a female mongrel originally named Kudryavtsuka, but later renamed Laika. Her true pedigree is unknown, although it is generally accepted that she was part husky or other Nordic breed, and possibly part terrier. NASA refers to Laika as a part Samoyed terrier. Laika was selected from 10 candidates at the Air Force Institute of Aviation Medicine because of her even temperament. She weighed about 6 kilograms. The pressurized cabin on Sputnik 2 was padded and allowed enough room for Laika to lie down and stand, and a regeneration system provided oxygen. Food and water were dispensed in a gelatinized form. Laika was chained in place and fitted with a harness, a bag to collect waste, and electrodes to monitor vital signs. Early telemetry indicated Laika was agitated but alive and well, although the cabin temperature had already reached 43 degrees Celsius by the third orbit. Biometric telemetry failed sometime after the fourth orbit. It was initially claimed that Laika had survived in orbit for a week. Decades later, Russian sources revealed that Laika likely had survived only a few hours in orbit before dying from overheating. The mission provided scientists with the first data on the behavior of a living organism in the space environment. Although the time between Sputniks 1 and 2 was only 32 days, the plan to launch a dog was in the works more than a year in advance. The Soviets already had significant experience launching dogs in high-altitude rockets, and they used that experience when ordered to quickly get Sputnik 2 into space. Impact. The time after Sputnik 2 was tense for the Americans and exciting for the Soviets. The day after Sputnik 2 went into orbit, the Gaither Committee met with President Eisenhower to brief him on the current situation. The committee, like much of the U.S., seemed to be in a panic, afraid that they were falling so far behind the Soviets technologically that it would put them in danger of a strike using nuclear weapons. Unlike most of the U.S., President Eisenhower kept calm through the time afterward, just as he did after Sputnik 1 was launched. According to one of the president's aides, the president's burning concern was to keep the country from going hog wild and from embarking on foolish, costly schemes. Quote, and by this he was referring to the push from the Gaither Committee and others to invest in creating nuclear fallout shelters in the U.S.S.R. Just 6 days after the launch of Sputnik 2, on the 40th anniversary of the October Revolution, Khrushchev boasted in a speech, "Now our first Sputnik is not lonely in its space travels." Sputnik 2 and the Van Allen radiation belt. The Van Allen radiation belt was almost named the Vernov belt after S.N. Vernov from Moscow State University. Sputnik 2 detected the Earth's outer radiation belt in the far northern latitudes, but the significance of the elevated radiation was not realized because Sputnik 2 passed through the Van Allen belt too far out of range of the Russian tracking stations. In Australia, Professor Harry Messel intercepted the signals. Other stations in Australia and South America had also been in range and intercepted the signals. However, the Soviets would not release the code that would allow the stations in Australia and South America to read the signals, and without the code, the stations would not cooperate and send the data to the Soviets. The disagreement cost the Soviets the opportunity to claim one of the most significant findings of the space race at the time, and it wasn't until the U.S. launched Explorer 1 that the radiation belts were proved by James Van Allen. In 1958, with Sputnik 3, they began to cooperate, and they confirmed the findings of the U.S. satellites Explorer 1, 3, and 4. Re-entry. Sputnik 2 re-entered the Earth's atmosphere the 14th of April 1958, at approximately 0200 hours, on a line that stretched from New York to the Amazon. Its track was plotted by British ships and 3 Moonwatch observations from New York. It was said to be glowing and did not develop a tail until it was at latitudes south of 20 degrees north. Estimates put the average length of the tail at about 50 nautical miles. Replicas. A copy of Sputnik 2 that was used in testing before the launch is located at the Kansas Cosmosphere and Space Center in Hutchinson, Kansas.